Anyway, I'd like to briefly introduce our primary speakers here. And I've known these guys for, I don't know, 20 years.
Pretty close.
Yeah, we're aging together. So on my far right is Gary Allen.
Hi, Warren.
Gary is, we'll talk probably a little bit about, Gary can talk a little bit about his own eye condition, not get into any detail, but Gary was a volunteer at Vesby for many, many years, and he's working as an independent living counselor now for one of the independent living centers. Next to him is Mark Rafferty. If any of you are Vesby clients, you may have heard of him. He's a rehabilitation
Hopefully
teacher
good things.
for Vesby. And I would say, like, if you haven't heard of rehab teachers for working with people with low vision or people who are blind, it's more like an occupation. He has something like an occupational therapist, something like that, because his role is to improve the independent living functions of people who have low or no vision in their homes. So that's who they are, and they can say more if they need to. So, who wants to go first here? I guess, Mark, you should go first.
Okay.
Mark is going to speak on age-related eye diseases and Vesby low vision exams and anything else he wants to address.
Thank you, Marcia. Can everyone hear me? Hopefully. Okay, excellent. Good. No one has ever accused me of being quiet. In any case, as Marcia mentioned, my name is Mark Rafferty. I'm a rehabilitation teacher with the Bureau of Education and Services for the Blind, where I've worked for nearly 18 years, at least 15 of those years with Marcia. I'll just say a little bit about myself. I myself am legally blind and have been served by Vesby for, well, a lot of decades, although I celebrated my 29th birthday, again, for probably about the 10th or 12th year in October. In any case, I was born with a genetic condition known as albinism. It was passed along to me by my parents through recessive genes. I'm the only one in my family that has it. And it's left me very light sensitive and affects my skin, my hair, a few other medical issues, but principally my eyes. So hence that's why I'm wearing the telescopic glasses that you see me wearing at this time, which are very, very helpful for my particular condition. They have a very narrow audience of folks that they can help, and they do help me out quite a bit. Look, that's enough about me, and I'm happy to answer questions later on. We'll be around after our presentation. But Marcia had asked us to say a little bit about Vesby. We are here in Windsor, although we do provide statewide services. For those of you who may know, we're at 184 Windsor Avenue in the Wilson section of Windsor. So it's a pleasure to actually be here today at the Windsor Senior Center, because I feel this is my second home. Being in Windsor, I spend more time sometimes in the office than I do at my own house. So good to be here. And I'm one of 3 rehabilitation teachers that Marcia mentioned that go out, and our fields are very much akin, as Marcia mentioned, to occupational therapists. So there are 2 other folks, Pat Tavares and Jonathan Gansfried, who work. Some of you may know Pat because Windsor's primarily her territory. And as most of Marcia has said, most of our services are of the nature where we come to people rather than people come to us. So in speaking a little bit about what low vision is this morning and what it isn't, and I'm going to discuss that, and I'm also going to discuss eye diseases, hopefully not in a very clinical ways, because I'm not a science person and I'm not a doctor, and I think the best understanding is just to explain some of the most common eye conditions, some of which you might be familiar with either through personal experience or that of your family or friends. So what low vision is it could be any number of conditions or maladies that result in somebody having significant vision loss. This is not simply going out and saying, well, my vision has changed a little bit, I need to go to the doctor, and they tweak my prescription and now I have a different one. It's typically people who are having an eye condition that might be progressive or might be stable, but that renders significant vision loss that cannot be corrected through surgery, medication, or some type of therapeutic treatment. So it's typically categorized for people with significant vision loss. Is typically characterized for folks at a visual acuity of 20/70 or worse. And 20/70 is not legally blind, and I'll explain that in a minute. But it's significant vision loss, and it's a result of this is in a number of eye conditions, which I'll get into in a moment. So when you go to the eye doctor, people have seen that fraction, 20/20. Of course, that's the vision that everybody aspires to have. Our clients don't have that level of functional vision. But when that lower number increases, the vision tends to be worse. That tends to be one of the ways that they assess. So vision loss is assessed in two ways. It's assessed either by visual acuity, which is that number, 20/20, 20/40, 20/70, and so on, and also by visual fields. So visual fields are what you kind of see all around you. And if you picture a circle or a piece of pie or a pizza or whatever analogy you want to use, and cutting that in half, that's about 180 degrees. That's about what most people with intact visual fields have. So people who have diminished vision may have a reduced field. It might be a central field loss, or it might be a peripheral field loss, and I'll explain more about those in a moment. But in any case, it could be based on visual acuities, or the half circle that we speak about, in which people can see, or a combination of both. It's possible that folks may have two conditions that coexist at the same time, and that's always more challenging. So low vision typically starts in a visual acuity of 20/70. It is regarded as having significant vision loss or very significant field restrictions. So a little bit about that. Let me talk about some of the most common eye conditions that we come across. I'm going to start off, it's not really an eye disease, but I'm going to start off by talking about cataracts. Cataracts are something that everybody over time will eventually end up with. And what it is, it's a clouding of the lens of the eye. The lens becomes more opaque or discolored. With time, it becomes less translucent. If you look through a clear glass window, it's clear, but what happens is the lens of the eye becomes less pliable as we age. The proteins in the eye change, and that's really what causes some of the things to happen. And it becomes less pliable and more opaque, more yellow. One of the signs that people tend to think that they realize they have cataract issues, first of all, they should be under the care of an ophthalmologist or optometrist to go ahead and help determine that, and everybody should be going for that type of care. I'll get into that in a moment as well. But one of the things that the lens of the eye, and as I said, just it becomes harder to see, and people tend to crave more light. That's one of the symptoms. So the good news that in most cases, cataract surgery is a possibility for most people. Okay, and they can have cataract surgery, and in most cases there is some tangible benefit to the person. Sometimes even improved vision beyond what their vision had been before, because the lenses have been improved so much through the years. Most of the time it's done as an outpatient procedure, and so many of you may be familiar with it if you've had it already or have known someone that's had cataract surgery. So not an eye disease, but a condition that's oftentimes associated with age. So I wanted to say a little bit about that. So not a disease, but a condition that folks see, but oftentimes correctable. By far and wide, the largest majority of the clients that we serve have something known as age-related macular degeneration. Has anyone heard of that? Heard of age-related by show of hands? Or okay, some of you may have heard of that. And what this is the eye is a complex organ, and even though it's small, there's a lot that goes into it. And this is a problem that's rooted in the retina. Okay, the retina is the most complex part of the eye. It's responsible for sharp central vision. So sharp central vision. So folks with macular degeneration, the macula is part of the retina, that wears away or deteriorates with time. And what people tend to see are voids in their central field of vision. Okay, so it becomes a little less, or a little more challenging, I should say, to read, because we typically look straight ahead when we're looking at something. We might look to the side or we might shift our whole head, but for reading and for a lot of tasks, central vision is critically important, and that's one of the things that oftentimes comes up as a concern. So there are two different types. There's wet macular and there's dry macular. They both should be monitored by a doctor, and they should be treated by a doctor. And that's really what I just want to say about it. So one of the signs that you might be developing it is if you're losing central field of vision. Okay. So that's something kind of a, it happens oftentimes with age. It can happen in earlier in life, although it's more rare. There's a condition known as Stargardt's disease, which is kind of like a juvenile form for most of the macular is age related. The other eye condition is something known as glaucoma. Okay, has anyone ever heard of glaucoma? And what this is an imbalance of pressure that is placed on the optic nerve. The optic nerve is the part of the eye that goes between the brain and the eye itself. Okay, and when there's pressure, something is squeezed. If I'm squeezing this microphone, it's hard plastic, it's not going to crush. But if there's constriction or pressure that's being placed on the blood vessels and those nerves going to the eye, that cuts off critical nutrients and critical sensory information is conveyed to the eye. And what happens is things die off, and people develop really tunnel-like vision, and eventually glaucoma, if it's not treated or not managed, can lead to very significant, if not total, vision loss. So people can live with it very oftentimes, and it's oftentimes treated with medication, or at least watched by the doctor. When you've gone to the doctor, if you've ever had that test with the puff of air, has anyone ever had that done? Or they use a thing called a tonometer. They come up to your eye and they'll just place something, a little probe against the eye for just a very short period of time. It's usually very uncomfortable. People usually remember this. That's how they measure intraocular pressure. So it's not like getting the blood pressure taken on your arm when you go to the doctor. It's done actually in the eye, and so that's something that comes up from time to time. So again, causes restrictions or a narrowing of peripheral visual fields. Central field of vision remains largely intact unless it's very severe. But and if you have macular degeneration and you have that eye condition, that's a very big challenge, because one has an impact in one area and one has an impact in the other, and the two aren't certainly working together. The other eye condition that is very common is diabetic retinopathy. Okay, if anyone has a history of diabetes in their family or has diabetes, there's always that risk that somebody could develop diabetic retinopathy. And what it does is it changes the blood vessels or alters the back of the eye. And even with good diabetic management, sometimes this does happen. But again, with all these eye conditions, the one thing I want to underscore is that everyone here in this room should be seeking routine ophthalmological treatment and going to the doctor. Even if it's once a year, whatever the doctor's protocol recommends. We're not doctors. We don't provide medical information or advice. But everyone should be, at this point, should be going ahead and going to an ophthalmologist periodically just to check for ocular disease. And it may be very good that you hear that nothing is going wrong. It's good validation. But also at the same time, going is a way of going, is a means of detecting things that are early on. If there are these signs that something might be going wrong. Because things that are treated earlier have a much greater risk a much greater rate of success. So, any questions about those? I covered what low vision is, and really what it's not. I spoke about some common eye diseases, including macular, cataracts, cataracts as I mentioned is not a disease, cataracts, macular, glaucoma, and diabetic retinopathy. Those are the four biggest ones. There are other eye conditions that come along with that, but we could be here all day kind of discussing each of those. And if people have specific questions at the end, they can certainly come to any of the three of us.
Mark, you could probably address eligibility for professional services too.
Okay, excellent. It's a very good point. So we mentioned BESB, which again stands for Bureau of Education and Services for the Blind. So we serve thousands of clients across the state of Connecticut, and people say, well, how do they become eligible? That's what Marcia's speaking of. Typically, most of our referrals come by way of an eye doctor, okay? An optometrist or an ophthalmologist, okay? So they will send something that's referred to as an eye report. We have a standard form that they are really expected to use. Some people opt to use their own form, or they'll together a narrative, but we look for key bits of information in that eye report. We look for an eye condition. We look for visual acuities. We look for visual fields. And we also look for, as I said, a prognosis. Those are the three, and we look for, obviously, to be signed off by the doctor. So that's typically the port of entry. Some people will self-refer. I had a client recently that moved here from out of state, was getting services elsewhere. So she was familiar with the process and she kind of facilitated this on her own. But most new clients, new to our system, it will begin with an eye report. If there's ever a doubt, you can always request your eye doctor send one to us, in which case we will then evaluate the eye report, and it'll be coded one of a couple of ways. It'll be coded as, if you're not eligible for services, we would hopefully connect you with services. I know Marcia's got a resource packet where it mentions the Lions Low Vision Centers. For clients that are maybe perhaps not quite at the point where we can serve them because of the criteria we have, that's often a great resource. But if we are able to serve them, we would certainly let them know. First point of contact would usually be from one of our social workers. We currently have 4, and they would reach out to you and say, you know, Mrs. Smith or Mr. Jones, we had an eye report that we received from your ophthalmologist, and they'd introduce themselves and provide an overview of services. If you're interested in the services, they would come to your home, and then they would determine a path of services that would help you and support you in your needs and addressing your independent living needs, which we're really not going to get into great detail with today. But our services are free. I want to emphasize that too. And we really work with people over the course of their lifetime. So we serve, obviously, children, we serve adults, and we serve people of all ages. So our services are free, and we can, again, work with people to address what needs they have to maximize their independence or help them to be able to maintain that dignity. Yes?
Can you just give an example of what type of service that you would provide for a client?
Well, again, the social worker would come out, and so begin with the social work intake, and then sometimes it's rehabilitation teaching in the home. It might be low vision services. Could be some of the aids that you'll see here would speak to some of the things we might provide. So it might be, first thing typically is most of our clients, I want to debunk a rumor that when they hear the term legal blindness, most of our clients have some functional vision. We do have clients who are totally blind, but they're in a very small minority. So we would typically go out, as a social worker, go out to the home. During COVID, it was a little bit different. There was an opportunity to conduct an intake over the telephone was offered, and if people are still more comfortable with that, that's still an option. They then might dispatch somebody like myself or my colleague Pat, who principally serves the Windsor area, out to the person's home, determine whether in fact they can benefit from handheld magnifiers, evaluations of lighting conditions in their home, which make a big difference. Certain things like marking household appliances with tactile or high contrast markings make a difference. So you can more accurately set your stove if you're setting the dial to say 350. You don't want it on 500. We also offer what's referred to as orientation mobility services. This can be connecting people with transportation resources in their community, whether it be dial-a-ride, paratransit, fixed route buses. They help with what's called now a technique called human guide, which is a way of going ahead and escorting somebody who might have very diminished vision in certain situations. Maybe perhaps it might be environmental where it's very dark, very crowded. They can also provide, in some cases, if it's appropriate, a white cane, which is kind of the universal symbol for legal blindness. So those are some of the things they provide. And we do tie in with other services. We can tie in with the talking book services, the National Library Service for the Blind talking book services. And then also a program that you folks might be very familiar with, because they're headquartered here in Windsor, is CRIS Radio, which stands for Connecticut Radio Information Service, which kind of in a nutshell, they read various components of the newspaper each day to folks with a print or visual disability or a print disability, which doesn't necessarily have to be. It could be a learning disability. It could be someone who can't hold print matter. But we would certify people who are on our rolls for that service if it's something that they're interested in. So I hope that answers that question.
Any other questions so far? Okay, I do want to say another thing before, sorry, let me back up here. I do want to say another thing. Each one of you should have gotten a folder, but I want to say that there's other materials that are over here on this table. Some of them are in large print and others are not. But there's pamphlets on eye diseases. There are, I didn't have enough copies for everybody, but there is this pamphlet over there, little booklet, what you should know about low vision, and there's some other versions of this over there. So just help yourself when this is over, because you may, it just gives you more information. So anyway, at the end of this, I'm going to go over all the things that are in the blue folder, so you know what they are. But now we're going to move on to the second part of our presentation, which is demonstration of low vision aids. And I'm not sure how you guys want to split this up.
Give Gary a chance to speak a little bit.
Okay.
Cover some of what he brought, and then I can do the same.
Hello, my name is Gary Allen. I work as an advocate at Independence Northwest. Independence Northwest is one of the 5 independent living centers that serves Connecticut. The one that serves closest to you would be Independence Unlimited. They have 5 basic core services: information and referral, independent living skills training, peer counseling, advocacy, and translation services. And that's all I'll say about that. And if you need to learn anything more, you can feel free to give me a call or contact me. So my eye disease, I have cataracts. I was born with cataracts. And I was born totally blind. And I was blind for like the first 2 years of life until I had surgery. I see 2200 now. So I'm right at the line of being legally blind. And that kind of means someone sees 200, so if you see 2200, if I see 2200, that means that I see for every 20 feet that you see, it looks 200 feet away from me. So that's what that means. Do you have any questions so far? Or? So do we want to just start doing,
Right. Talk about you can talk about the devices that you use in your own homework. I want to say too that even though, well, I'll just say as a person who isn't blind but has some vision-related issues that pertain primarily to contrast, that I found like a lot of the things that are used by people with low vision and are given out by VESB are useful to the rest of us too. Like for example, we're going to demonstrate these bump dots.
I'll hold them up some Marcia.
And if I get up at night, I wear contact. I'm not going to use my contact lens, but my vision is so poor. But I use these bump dots if I want a cup of cocoa in the middle of the night or something like that. So these are things that are helpful, for not only people that meet the definition of low vision or legally blind, but those of us that are sort of, in that in-between area where maybe you can't function at night very well, you need additional light. So anyway, with that, I'll turn the microphone back to you guys.
Okay, so some of the things I use, I'll go to the first one, and you wouldn't think Alexa would be as, Alexa is really a good resource for,
Does everyone know what Alexa is? Does everyone here have
Echo.
one?
It's an Echo Dot.
Yeah.
it's an Echo Dot, yep. But I have an example. I can use it on my phone. It's the same thing as the thing, so I said, Alexa, what's the temperature?
Right now, it's 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Today, expect a high of 36 degrees.
Okay, Alexa, what time is it?
It's 10:37 a.m.
I use that like 20 times a day. And you could use that or Google Dot or Google Home Nest. It used to be Google Home Nest. And it's a great resource for someone who needs these things, who needs the temperature. You can buy separate things, and as technology gets better, more of this stuff is off the shelf instead of specialty products now. Another thing I have is this I've had since I was in high school. It's a calculator, but it has big buttons on it, so someone can see. This is an example of Mark was talking about the Talking Book program, and this is an example of the player that you would get. It comes with a cartridge in here, and it's really just a USB port. It's really just a USB drive.
Yeah, the cartridge makes it a little bit easier to handle. It makes it a little bit bigger for dexterity.
Yeah. So, okay, another thing, like what I use for daily things, it's a magnifying glass. It has a light on it. And this is, I don't use it as much. I also, oh, okay. And how many people need to cut, how many people need to cut pills? This is a great thing. You can get it at CVS. Probably costs $2, $3. And it makes it a lot easier. I had to buy it because I had to cut pills for my dog.
I do that too. So,
Okay, so I have two of these. Well, they're mine. So this is a thermometer. And that is the temperature in the room. And it's just a regular stand thermometer. This one is a little bit more.
It's a talking thermometer, is
Yes,
the
yes,
point.
yes. And this one is a little bit. You can put this in the meat, and you can set the temperature. And you can set the temperature so it will go off at. It's not really. This one isn't really talking. It will go off at. You can set the temperature so for 140, for 145 for a steak. You can put there, and it will beep when it gets to that temperature, so you're not overcooking your meals. So one thing I would like to pass around to everyone. This is an example of the eye diseases. You just pass it around. And you can look at that and you can see the eye diseases that, and it gives an example of the eye diseases. What does everyone think of that? Yeah, you'll look into it.
Yeah, I see how to use it, yes.
Another example, I kind of went off the rails with that. Another example is a funnel. You wouldn't think how much often you need a funnel, but you do, right?
absolutely.
Yes.
It's great for you wouldn't think how much.
Well, not just for liquid ingredients, but even filling like a salt shaker,
Oh,
things
yeah.
like that. Yeah.
Yes, I use it for that all the time. And in fact, I was at my sister's house a few weeks ago for a Halloween thing, and she didn't have a funnel. So guess what she's getting for Christmas? I already bought it for her.
Last of the big spenders.
No, I'm gonna get her something else
Practical-
too.
Practical present.
I'm gonna get her something else too, it's just this. Okay, so this is something that you can use today. You know what this is? These are things that you put on your shoes. And I've never fallen when I wore these, because I have a pair of these myself. You put these on the bottom of your shoes.
Would they have a name, Gary?
Oh, they're called stabilizers.
Okay.
A couple of different companies
Yeah.
make similar products
Yeah,
though.
yeah, yes. This is the ones that I have. There are other companies. This you can get this at 32 North. That's the company that distributes them. And these are just fantastic. You'll never fall if you're wearing these.
And if you wear them all the time, or is it just during the?
Oh, just when it's icy,
Oh, okay.
because they tend to wear down. So you have to replace these things, which aren't expensive. But these just screw out when you just put new ones in. That's why I like these.
So they're actually metal,
Yes.
correct?
Yes, they are
I
metal.
don't know if anybody can see that, but
There's
they're.
little
they're-
spikes.
Yeah.
They're almost like golf shoes or soccer cleats. They've got that grip. I have a similar product at home called Yak Tracks. They're like a braided cable that goes over a boot. But it's a very good point that Gary brings up, because one of the things for a lot of folks that have poor vision, depth perception is a huge issue. And so you can't tell if you're stepping in, if you may not be able to tell if there's ice, or we all know about black ice in the driveway. You're taking your trash can out early in the morning for the collection, and this keeps you safe. Oh, I'm sorry.
You talk for a while, and
Okay.
then we'll go back to it.
Okay. Well, just to pick up on where Gary left off, we have a lot of things assembled here on the table. And just like Gary mentioned before, some of these things are common things you may have in your home, like the funnel already, at least you should have. But some of them are very blindness specific, and I have a kind of combination of other things too that fall on that same line. One of the biggest challenges people face when they lose vision is writing tasks. This is an example of bold line paper, okay? And this is an example of a 2020 pen. So people might use this for a shopping list. So I was a teacher at one, a classroom teacher, so I actually got to be able to write pretty well upside down. Marcia, you didn't even know this was one of these I could do, huh? And, so, yeah, I did. Okay. So people could write out a shopping list, telephone numbers. I know people write down oftentimes when they take their medications. My aunt has to take her blood pressure readings, and she somehow or other doesn't believe the machine will restore the last 100 numbers, even though it says it. She does keep a diary. So that's pretty handy. This is a special pen also. It's called a 2020 pen. There are a lot of other comparable products that exist. And basically what this is, the ink does not bleed through into the opposing paper. That's one of the big things that it has. You can see it didn't bleed through. But it has a fairly thick line without being too thick. It's not one of those chisel tip markers that you've probably seen people oftentimes mark a box when they're moving, kitchen or bedroom or whatever, if they're moving, or labeling things, maybe boxes in their attic for holiday decorations. This you can use for more routine writing purposes, and it is a felt tip. This particular product is nice because it doesn't have it's not petroleum-based ink. A lot of the petroleum-based inks bleed through onto the second page. When you're writing, obviously that becomes a problem. If you are only using those types of pens, you could always stick a piece of cardboard between the pages, and that prevents it from ruining an entire tablet of paper. These are very hard to find, but they can be purchased online. Amazon, Marshall's got some other resources, including a catalog called MaxiAids. They're typically cheaper if they're ordered in quantity, but if you're looking for a good replacement or good other option that might be locally available, Flare pens, they've been around for years. you haven't tried them in a while, they have reformulated them. They're a lot better than they used to be. Some of the Sharpie markers are very comparable. They come in different line widths, and some of those also don't bleed through depending on the type you buy. Black tends to be the most important thing for contrast. And one of the things that people don't think about, Marcia did touch on contrast. The quality of the paper you use makes a big difference. So even when you go out and you're buying paper for your printer at home, if you have a computer, the print paper they have at Staples or any of the stores you might go to, you say you're asking for a ring of white paper. It's like going to the paint store. It's like going up to the Ace Hardware store here in the center of Windsor by Geisler's and saying, I want white paint, okay? There's different shades of white, and a lot of paper now, because of the recycled content, what used to be very white might appear very gray. So spending an extra $1 or so on a ream of 500 sheets of paper will give you a better quality paper that will absorb ink better, and it will also provide better contrast, just a little secret. If people don't want to use if they don't want to use a tablet like that, this is an 8.5 by 11 full-page writing guide, and this can go right over a piece of paper. You can use a little paper clip at the top to keep it from shifting, or I'm a big believer in that blue painter's tape is a tip. So you can kind of tape this down to like a surface, this has got like a plastic top, it wouldn't harm it. You would probably want to write directly on a wooden table that's, you might scratch, but the tape would scratch, but you don't necessarily want to leave any impression from the ink. But that's a really, really great tool. This is reusable. It's not a consumable item. You just buy the regular paper. They make similar products for addressing envelopes, which is something we get a lot of requests about. I'm going to hold this up. Anyone have any idea what this might be used for? Signature? Close. There is a signature slot on here. Anybody else think you're on the right path? This is a check writing guide. Yeah, writing a check. This goes over standard size bank checks. However, what a lot of people don't know is that you can order through most of your banks, sometimes at an upcharge, depending on the circumstances and what kind of account you have, large print checks. They are the size of a business or a payroll check, but they're not. They don't come in one of those big books like an accountant or bookkeeper would have. They do tear off to the side, but they're one checkbook. They're just one footprint of a check. And they give you a little bit more real estate, as I like to say, to be able to write things out. They come with a large print check register. They come with the carbonized deposit slips. So people ask where they're available. Webster Bank, I know, well, it's now M&T, but it used to be People's Bank, had them. I bank with Wells Fargo, I use them. So if Harlan Clark or Deluxe, who are the two people that print most of the checks in the United States, if one of your banks probably utilizes one of those companies, they're likely available. Sometimes called sight checks or low vision checks. The person who had answered before about the signature guide, this is an example. This fits in a wallet, and this is exactly what you can use so that you can sign kind of within a confined space. Very simple, very inexpensive. We routinely provide these to clients, and if somebody wanted to purchase one of their own, they're like under $2. We don't sell products, but Marcia's put together some resources. Marcia mentioned these bump dots, and she kind of alluded to what they're used for. They can be used for a variety of things, marking up household appliances. You go into my house and you walk in the kitchen, you'll see them on the stove, microwave, and dishwasher. And we don't mark every setting on them because it kind of defeats the purpose, but they're high contrast and they're raised. They're like a rubberized consistency. So, for instance, on my microwave at home, I have that 30-second button. If you don't have one on your microwave, you should look to see if you have a relatively new one. It's either add a minute or add 30 seconds. Very, very helpful. I just tap it out twice for a minute, 4 times for 2 minutes, and so on. And then I have the clear off marked. And then I have the one for the light and the exhaust because mine's above the stove. But very, very helpful. I don't care about popcorn, baked potatoes. I don't care about any of that. I just want to be able to really use them for reheating. And likewise, with a lot of other appliances, there's a lot of features we don't use. Like on the dishwasher, there's like 12 buttons. I only use the same 2 all the time. That's all I have marked. So they come in different colors. So if your appliances had a We're black in color, we would use white or the day glow orange for maximum contrast. They used to have them different shapes and sizes. These are among the most common. I have also, going along the subject of I'm sorry? Oh yeah, large. This is a low vision cutting board. These are a little pricey. I have mixed feelings about them. They come in different sizes because I think that in most cases you can replicate the same thing by going to Walmart or to Target over on Kennedy Road. And it's light on one side and dark on the other. So if you were cutting up, for instance, a white onion, you could use the dark side, or maybe making a sandwich on a light colored bread. Flip it over, maybe you're making a sandwich on pumpernickel bread, the dark bread, or cutting up a tomato. The contrast makes it a little bit easier to be able to see where the item that you're cutting or working with is on that cutting board in terms of the plane. One thing I also would like to say, this is a dollar store item. Anyone know what this is? Looks like I'm covering up now what it is. This is a roll of shelf liner. It's that rubberized shelf liner that it's kind of a waffle weave. It almost looks like what goes underneath scatter rugs sometimes too from time to time. You can put this underneath a cutting board to prevent it from moving as you're chopping if it's sliding back and forth in your counter. This is nice because it also can be cut into placemat-sized pieces and will provide contrast and will prevent something from moving, sometimes even prevent a glass from sliding on the table. Comes in different colors. This, again, is the dollar store version, but if you want to spend a little bit more money, it is better quality to buy it like in a big box store, but it's the same type of product you use to line shelves. So that's a bit of a contrast. Clock, I'm going to get to the magnifiers in the end. I'll do that at the end. And then this is the same when I get to that too. This is an example of a large print clock, large numbers. Why most clocks are red, I don't know. A very bad color for contrast. This is green in color. This has about a 2-inch display. They also make talking clocks too, which we didn't really talk about, but Harry touched upon that with the thermometers. So there are ones that talk, both as a bedside clock, a talking wristwatch, if this isn't one that talks, but also they also make a little talking key fob, which is kind of like the button used to unlock and lock the doors to an automobile. So Marcia mentioned before, she was mentioning to me, this is and I've left my bottle of water here, but this is a liquid level indicator. This rests on the side of a glass. And what this particular model actually, not only does it have that tone, let's see if I can do it again, you can hear it. What it'll do is it will let you know, it's called a say when or a liquid level indicator, it will let you know when you get within about a half an inch of the top of a glass. So it operates on conductivity. You're not going to get a shock. There's only a little button battery in here. But it's a handy little item instead of sticking your finger into the cup, which is not sanitary, and it's also a hazard if you're pouring water from, say, a hot kettle for tea. So a handy little gadget. Works pretty well. As I said, not for filling things like any type of vessel that goes on top of the stove, like a pot or a pan, or a cereal bowl, but something you'd physically drink from. Like whether it be a coffee cup or a glass of soda or that kind of thing. So that's helpful. Also, this little plate. Yeah, this little plate. Okay, and I actually would also, this is plastic. This is actually a plate that's got a little guard that goes around the side, a little raised. This one happens to be melamine, their fancy name for plastic. It's microwave safe, but it prevents you from it makes it easier. There's a little bit of a bumper or a little bit of a well that goes around to make it easier to get food keep food on the plate and to get it onto your fork. There's a little bit of a bank here, a little bit of a ramp. This is somewhere between the size of, say, a dinner plate and, say, like a lunch plate. It's kind of an odd size. It's in between, but people like these. Sometimes this is paired up with, people might use that in conjunction with making a little placemat out of the shelf liner type product. Also, on the subject of contrast, take nothing away from this presentation, this is going to be the important thing. Having contrast is really, really important. If people are starting to lose vision, if you go into someone's home and they've got all sorts of china or dinnerware that's got all sorts of flowers or bands or stripes. Something that's solid is a lot easier to find food on your plate, and also think about what you might be serving. So if this were, if I did, I don't know, pasta, and I know people sometimes will just do like a butter on pasta and that kind of thing rather than a red sauce, wouldn't show up very well on this plate, okay, because of the color, okay? So think about, might be helpful to have maybe a light or a dark plate. You could buy open stock pieces pretty easily at most big box stores, or sometimes even going to a thrift store or Goodwill or that kind of thing. But look for something that doesn't have a lot of patterning, because it's a visual distraction. And makes it a little bit harder for you to see what you're actually working with. And same thing with the coffee mug. I brought this mug home for a reason. Now that I've kind of given away the answer, does anyone know why this is a bad mug to use?
It's also too small.
It is too small. Gary's absolutely right. This is the one that gets pushed in the back of my cabinet. Why is this a bad color mug for coffee?
Same color.
Yeah, it's dark. It's dark. So we want to use a light colored mug. If you're pouring like water for tea, it doesn't really matter. But if you are working with a beverage, it's better to go ahead and have something like that. Gary brings up a good point. Everybody has these mugs now that they get that are the size of a small swimming pool or a bathtub, and you can get a mug now that they do come in different colors. So something like this might be very helpful if you were, I don't know, you don't have to use it for hot beverages, but if you were pouring yourself a glass of milk, because again, you're going to have the contrast, okay? Also, it comes with a handle, which is a bonus. Doesn't have to be used. One of the things that's not here on the table that I will mention to people, people love this idea. Who has trouble getting that little glass turntable on and off the carousel in their microwave, because you have to get it in a certain way? I'm going to let you in a little, apparently there's somebody right over here, I'm going to let you in a little secret, okay? One of the things that you can do, and you may have this at home, make sure of course that it's Pyrex or glass and not metal, speaking of the microwave, is to keep a 9-inch pie plate or 9 or 10-inch pie plate in your microwave at all times. You can rest your bowl of soup or whatever that could possibly boil over, or your coffee mug. It shouldn't boil over. It's a lot easier just to grab that pie plate out of the microwave and wash it in the sink or put it in the dishwasher than it is to try to get that. You still have to wash that little carousel once in a while, but the less often I have to deal with it, the better I like it. So just a little thing, you probably have a pie plate at home already, maybe that's migrated to the back of the cabinet, or maybe it hasn't if you're a baker, but that's a good thing to keep in the microwave to prevent having to do a kind of a massive cleanup, as I'd like to say. So I'm trying to think of other things I have. Let's see, over here. I do want to talk a little bit about magnifiers, okay? The magnifiers that we bring with us when we go out, again, BESB does provide in-home services for low vision evaluations. So we'll show people a variety of magnifiers. We don't show every one we've got because it's like going to a shoe store. You don't try on every pair. Some will fit, some aren't what you're looking for. But we look at your eye report that we've obtained from the eye doctor before going, and we usually, a good rehab teacher will be able to narrow down and delineate the type of magnifier you need in fairly short order. I can usually do it within 2 or 3 choices, okay? Sometimes even on the first try. But this particular magnifier is nice. It has an LED light. I don't want to blind anybody, but you can see it does light up. Lighting is very important. If you go, it makes all the difference in the world, okay? And sometimes that's impacted seasonally, and sometimes lighting can be good or bad. Sometimes on a day like today, there's a lot of glare from snow. I brought some sunglasses too that I think I can show folks. These are wraparound or fit over sunglasses. I kind of got away from the home piece, but sometimes when you're sitting at home, even on your couch, and you've got your drapes open, and you're getting it a little bit too bright. I know it sounds strange to wear sunglasses in the house, but not if you have a lot of light sensitivity. And these are nice because they're a fit-over variety. They come in different colors. This is kind of like a gray. They come in amber. We also have a special type that's really helpful for folks that experience issues with indoor glare, like going into like a Walmart or a supermarket, or where there's a lot of fluorescent lights or very light-colored floor covering. So that's something to be helpful. And sometimes even the very lightest pairs we'll even use in conjunction with one of the magnifiers because some people find this LED bulb too bright. The magnifiers that we carry or that the Lions would have are of a much better optical quality and strength that's more appropriate than what you would get, say, at a drugstore. People I know will sometimes run up to Ocean State Job Lot. My mother's done this, and she's got a magnifier she bought from there and loves it. And actually, for her, it works great. But a lot of times, for a lot of the folks that we serve, that strength is not enough. So we would come out, we would assess. There's different types. Gary has, if I may, over here, this type over here. He's got one that's got a long flashlight type handle. And this is one is nice that's meant to be flush against the page. So sometimes it's a little bit easier. If your hand tires or if you have tremors in your hand, you can just slide this along the page, whereas the other one is considered a pocket magnifier. This is one you can put in a case and put into a purse if you're a lady, or gentlemen have a deep pocket at this time of the year for a winter coat. Very, very, very helpful as far as that's concerned. Is there anything else on the table? Oh,
There's a watch.
Watch.
Are
Oh,
you talking watch, I guess?
yeah, and then Gary wants to share something too in a second. This is a talking watch, or not a watch, talking one, a low vision one. So it comes in. These come in either white face with black numbers, or the other way around, depending on the person's individual needs. So,
And this is a video magnifier.
yeah, Aaron, I give you the mic.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
This is a video magnifier.
Yeah.
You can see what's on my page. It makes it so you can see it. It works. It's in color. It's really, really fantastic.
That's that kind of a higher tech device.
It's around. These are kind of expensive.
Yeah, very expensive.
It's around between $700 and $900.
Yeah, they're not for everybody, but they do help for some folks.
It comes in different color. You can make it so it goes in different colors. You make it so it
Yeah,
goes
there
in
it goes.
different colors. Sorry, it was a little too far from my face.
So I think what we're going to do here is this, that I'm going to move on to a brief discussion of things that are in your blue folder. And then I would say, Mark and Gary, we're ahead of schedule here. So if you guys want to come up and see these devices and try them out,
Yeah, or have specific
Yeah.
questions.
or have specific questions, do that. And then over here on the table, I just had a bunch of stuff that I had collected from Besley. I didn't have enough of any one thing to hand out. But feel free to take anything that's on that table. And then I'm going to just start here with what I think is the most important thing.
Can I interrupt you for one
Go
last
ahead.
thing, Marcia, if I may?
Oh, and I'm
This is
talking
something
about
that'll give you a chance to get your stuff together too.
No.
I don't know. I had these out on the table and I forgot to mention them. Does anyone know what these items are? I'm holding up for any of you who can see them. Okay. This is called a file of life. Okay. And this is called a vial of life. Sometimes these are made available at drugstores for the Red Cross. This is the file of life. Actually, it's got a little magnet that can go on your refrigerator in the event you ever had an emergency and heaven forbid, needed to go to the hospital. I had a friend of mine who had an allergic reaction to something recently and had to go to the hospital, and it was very helpful. She was able to direct the EMT when she came, or when they came to take her to the hospital. She had an envelope, it wasn't one of these, but it was an envelope in case of emergency, taped to the side of her refrigerator. This is one that you actually, this is not a blindness-related matter. This is something that everybody might consider having. But there's information about here about prescriptions you might take, emergency contacts, the names of doctors or physicians. And I like the ones that go on the fridge better. They're magnet, and it's sometimes the EMS people are trained to look for these. This is one that's very similar, but has same thing, but it's rolled up into a scroll, made to look like a medication bottle. Okay, I'm sorry. Made to look like a medication bottle, and basically the premise behind this one is that you would keep this in the top shelf of your refrigerator and people would look for it. But If you've ever looked at some people's refrigerators, it's like looking at people's closets, you know, they may not see it. So, or if you had this, you might leave this prominently on a kitchen table or something like that. Or if you left it out, you'd say, heaven forbid you were in distress, or your spouse, you'd say there's a vial of life on the kitchen table, next to my vitamins or next to my medication. This has the information in there, and if you don't do anything, these aren't fancy, but I'm always urging people, because you never know when an emergency is going to happen. One of the things you can do is even just have an envelope with all that information that you can have. And if you're worried about prying eyes and the nosy neighbor that comes over that just brought over a pie and wants to read your information, put it in a sealed envelope, you know. And that way you can always put it in a new envelope in the event that it has to be opened by somebody who's obviously authorized to open it. But you can have it out there, and it's good information to have, and it should be updated and reviewed periodically. So that's what I wanted to share. I thought that was helpful.
Okay, well, I'm going to take you through your packet, but I'm going to start with the last page. So those of you that have a packet, what you're looking for is the last page. At least it was the last page in my booklet.
Does
which
everyone
is
have a
called-
packet?
Yes. You don't have one? Okay, I don't know what happened to our host here. There may be an extra one somewhere.
We'll make sure you get one.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so I think the last page, and I'm going to start with this one because this is what we're talking about. So this has a headline that says Catalogs of Independent Living Aids. And then what these are, the three that are listed are catalogs that you can get. And I think most of them are free, and this one for sure. So this one,
Maxi Aids, yep, holding it up.
okay, so the Maxi Aids one is, has most of everything that we're talking about here. And if you call them or go online and contact them, which is what I did, they
There's
sent
toll-free
me,
numbers in the back.
a free catalog, and it is awesome.
A lot of good products.
So all the products that we're talking about and then more. So these other two agencies here, LS&S and Independent Living Aids, are comparable. And again, you can call them or you can email them for a free catalog. So having said that, then I'll take you back to the rest of what's in here. Okay.
One thing I'd like to say, you can get a lot of the stuff from Maxi Aids. I think they even have a section on Amazon.
Yeah, okay, so.
Is that free with a Prime? I was going to say, can you order it? Because they have, actually, these people charge shipping, which you're only ordering a couple of 20/20 pens. You might be better off ordering through Amazon.
Well, I see Maxi Aid says they have free shipping. I'm not sure about the other ones, but
Oh, well, okay,
yeah.
cool.
So anyway, so here's some of the other things that I included. So first, it's called Resources for Adults Who Have Low Vision or Legal Blindness. And again, BESB serves people who are legally blind, but there's a whole list of what the eligibility is. There's also a summary again of most but not all of what we talked about here, including support groups that are held throughout the state, and typically at senior centers. Then after BESB, I did include just our umbrella agency is called Agency, what's it called? I don't even know.
Aging and Disability Services.
Aging and Disability Services. And so I included two programs through them, and these programs are not necessarily limited to people who are legally blind, but this agency offers a low-interest loan program for purchase of technology. And this would not be things like we're talking about here. This would be larger items that are expensive.
Things costing $1,000 or more, I'm
Yes.
guessing.
And then I included some other agencies here, but the one that I want to highlight is the Lions Low Vision Center. I didn't include page numbers because I wasn't sure how I was going to organize this. But under Lions Low Vision Center, you all know that there's a very active Lions group in Windsor, for those of you that are from Windsor. But they do not provide low vision services. So the low vision center that provides services for you, if you're not legally blind, but you need some of the same services, so you can't be served by Besby, is located in New Britain. And there's information there.
Their services are generally free. They provide really good services. They do ask for a modest donation if you are in a position to do it. Good program. They provide, again, some of the things that we may not be able to because we may not meet the threshold for
Right.
the vision piece.
And they're staffed by occupational therapists that are trained in low vision. So there's that. And then also at the bottom of that page, I included Independence Unlimited, which is the independent living center in Hartford that serves people that live in Windsor. And also another group, in case you want to buy a computer or something like that, that might be able to help you, called Plan of Connecticut. And finally, on the last page, there's just some additional information that I included of other resources like National Eye Institute, which is where I got a lot of materials, American Foundation for the Blind. Also, somewhere in here, I think there's a reference for National Federation of the Blind as well, which is a group that's headquartered in East Hartford, but has you can join it and attend support groups that are available in several communities. Actually, if you're interested in that, you can come talk to Gary. He might be able to help give you more information about those because I'm not sure where they are anymore. So that's it about the resources. You can look those over. You can certainly call Mark.
Absolutely.
Call Mark
yeah.
if you need more information.
Right. Our feeling at our agency is always that if there is, if we are not in a position to serve you because you don't qualify visually, maybe, and it's usually because your vision is obviously hasn't reached the threshold where we're able to do that, we always try to redirect people to another resource that can help them where they are at that present time. So Marcia mentioned the Lions Low Vision Center, a great resource. And so don't hesitate to call if there's something, even if we wouldn't be able to come out and provide some of the services unless you qualify. But if you have questions, we're certainly delighted to help in any way we can.
I should also mention Chris Radio, which is right down the road here in Windsor. It's listed in this resource booklet
Right.
too, I believe.
Great organization. So really, really helpful. I did mention before, does everyone know what they do? They read excerpts of the newspaper to folks. So the Hartford Current, they would read everything from front page news, the sports section, local news, the circulars for a lot of supermarkets like ShopRite. I don't know if they do Geisler's. I imagine they might, because they have Geisler's, because that's a small circular. But they do that. So it's not a radio program. It's not a radio station where you're going to hear music of any kind or genre. It's basically informational. It's all information. Occasionally they do have some, I would say, talk shows, so to speak, or for informational purposes. They'll have people. One of the people that does it is a gentleman that Marcia and I both know personally. He does this Senior Spotlight, which is the person that hosts that show is Steve Fall, and he does that show. I believe there's a monthly. And there are other people that will also have guest speakers on as well. So, but mainly newspapers. And Gary did talk about the library for the blind.
Yep.
I
just want to talk about Chris a little bit. So you can get Chris if you have a phone like this, a smartphone, or you can even use it on your Alexa. In order for it to say, you have to say a certain word. You have to be very specific how you say it, but you will be able to get Chris on your smartphone or your Alexa.
Yeah, they want you to apply for the services. There is a way of getting it, and they're very emphatic about. They want to be able to capture census for their audience. So it's possible to get these things through your phone or through, specifically through Amazon, the Amazon Echo or the Google Nest. But they do request that you register with them. They are a nonprofit, they receive funding. And if they can demonstrate that they have a broader listening audience, it opens up financial opportunities and other opportunities for them. So it's again, that's a free service, as is the Library for the Blind. Gary showed that machine. It's not that heavy. That has a rechargeable battery pack in it. And basically, what it does is it has up to 30 hours of playback time when fully charged. It also can be plugged in. The controls are simple. If you've ever used a cassette player or CD player, you'll virtually have no problem in mastering the use of this device. There is a headphone jack for private listening. And people often ask what's different about this than going to the Windsor Public Library, which has nice offerings. This is a service where the library materials come to you via the mail, okay? And they come in these little plastic mailing containers. On one side, there's a postcard that has your mailing address. And when you're done with the material, you'll put the cartridge back into the container. You remove the postcard, and underneath the postcard is the address of where it gets returned to. And the items are sent back what's called free matter for the blind. So for anyone who might have years ago used Netflix before they streamed, they used to have the DVDs going back and forth in the mail. They were free to mail back and forth. This agency has been doing this for a long time, many, many years before that ever happened. And you can get, everything is downloaded onto the digital cartridge, as Gary mentioned. So you can call up and request materials by title, by author, by genre, by ISBN number. They do publish catalogs. I will be honest, the catalogs are not terribly helpful because people get tired by the time they read. They say, oh, there's nothing I like, or they assume that's all that's available. It only represents a very small portion of what's in inventory or what's available to the public. So certainly consider it. They also have offerings in other languages. If somebody prefers to say get things in Russian, I have several Russian-speaking clients, or Spanish. If these materials are available, the selection might be a bit more limited, but they are available for speakers of other languages. So just to let you know, people are assigned what's called a reader advisor with that organization. That's your personal point of contact with the library. Often they can help you make selections based on prior selections or what your wants and likes are.
So you can also get the you don't have to have this anymore. You can get something called BARD, and it's from the Library for the Blind and Physically Handicapped, and you can put it on your phone. You can have headphones. You can get any phone, and you can just download it to your phone. And this is
It's got to be a smartphone or
Yes.
like an Android or a
It won't
Google.
work
So
on
if you have a
flip
flip phone, it's not going to work. Yeah.
so.
Just city in the Manoir, the center of civilization.
That's
Within its shining walls, 20 rival houses vied for power and glory.
that's an example of Game of Thrones.
So it complete with the British accent and everything too.
Yeah.
Some of them are professionally narrated, which is cool.
All of them are all of them are professionally narrated. And there's other services that might not work, but there's other services such as National Federation of the Blind has something called Newsline,
Yes.
where they have different newspapers. You can get newspapers from all around the country, and it reads it in a computer voice. The computer voices are getting much better.
That's true.
I have an example of that if you want, but whatever. If you want to hear it, I'll be glad to show you that.
All right, well, we're going to be here for one little while, so.
So yeah, it's synthetic speech. Let them maybe hear the difference between a human voice.
Sure.
So,
This isn't necessarily Newsline, but it is an example of a voice. Okay.
Centers for Independent Living, CILS, are consumer-controlled, community-based, cross-disability, non-residential private nonprofit agencies that are designed and operated within a local community by individuals with disabilities and provide an array of independent living services.
So that's,
Yeah, that's pretty clear, Gary. That's a lot better than it used to be years ago, trust me. So, any questions about what we've covered so far, whether it be for Gary or Marcia or me? Questions about anything that's been presented or anything perhaps that hasn't been presented that you would like to know more about? I gotta have the microphone. Any questions for us that anything that we've presented or haven't presented that you'd like to know more about specific to vision loss or resources? I'm sorry, did somebody have a question? Or? Boy, we've done such a good job, or we're losing people. I'm not sure which. So,
Well, we'll stay, okay, go ahead, over here.
yes,
About macular degeneration.
yes.
Are you finding that many of your clients are people who initially started with the injections and led the treatments first and then decided to step away from that?
Well, let me say a little bit about this. That's typically, we can't offer medical advice. We're not clinically able to, but what I will say is that it depends on whether it's wet or dry. If it's wet macular, for dry macular, they don't do the injections. If it's wet macular, somebody might be a candidate, something they would have to discuss with their retinal specialist. There's a number of medications that have been out on the market for a while that have been used. The one thing I will say, and again, it's not medical advice, I'm prefacing this, what those medications are intended to do, they do not reverse the effects of the condition. What they are intended to do is to stave off progression of the condition. So, some people are, have done well in terms of staving off the progression. Others have not, or it's slowed the progression down, maybe perhaps. It really depends, but it's something that perhaps people, there's a lot of information out there. I'm not telling, I don't advocate people playing internet doctor, but there's a lot of doctors that are certainly familiar with the therapeutic nature of these medications, and that they can probably best let somebody know their options. So there's at least 4 medications that I know that are sort of actively used right now. But again, one has to be a candidate for that, and really the only way to determine that is by a consult with a qualified doctor. Other questions?
Well, feel free to come up here and look at the stuff more closely.
Or
Okay.
if there's a question you didn't want to ask in a big
Yeah.
room like this, we're here, we don't bite. So,
And again, there's other publications, help yourself to what's over on the table. And I hope that, sorry. Well, I'd like to thank you for coming. We didn't know what to expect, given the snow. I feel like this is the 3rd time that we've attempted to have this.
but I'm glad I have
So-
that. This is
yeah,
great.
yeah, this is fun.
So thank you so much for having us, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you.